Here.
We're trying to report.
The wall is gone. To you, what do you make of just all of this? This is
Scaramucci helped prompt Sean Spicer's exit. He helped contribute to Reince Priebus's exit. At least if you look at the chronology of the past 10 or 11 days, he went from being the most visible man at the White House last Sunday, 8 days ago, to being invisible this Sunday. Right after the Ryan Liz interview, no more interviews, no more press. All of a sudden, Scaramucci disappeared. So maybe that was a signal of what was to come today with Kelly taking charge. What this doesn't do is tell us anything about the press strategy at the White House. There's no clarity about what the press strategy is, if there is a press strategy at all.
He was saying maybe bring the cameras back. That's what we got from Scaramucci.
That's right. He was suggesting sort of a carrot and a stick, offering a carrot by allowing the cameras to be turned back on. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, all of a sudden, is the leading force now in the press shop. As the new press secretary, who will have to step in front of the cameras in 45 minutes, she is now the only person there that we've had there all along, now that Spicer and Scaramucci are both out.
I wonder if Spicer is having second thoughts with Scaramucci out of the shop. Just out loud musings here. I mean,
right.
David
He's being asked that question according to, I believe, Kevin Liptak, our White House reporter.
Right.
The upper press inside the White House, people are asking Spicer, are you going to stay now? No answer either way so far from Mr. Spicer.
Of course, Mooch became bigger than Trump, and haven't we seen this before? The fact that I'm using the word Mooch, using the name Mooch. He was in the tabloids all weekend. He was the center of
the worry
attention.
With Bannon once upon a time,
exactly.
right?
But not in a good way. And he was getting, I was just texting with a source who said to me, look, he was getting too far out front and in a bad way, and that the president realized it. And I'm sure his family, by the way, realized it. I'm sure Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner did not like the language that Scaramucci was using. And to your point, there is only one star in this constellation, and that is Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. Although the president gave Scaramucci his blessing before he came on with Chris Cuomo for that 30-minute interview on New Day, end of last week. But hang on, just going back to Sean Spicer briefly, is there a possibility that he's going to say, hit the brakes, record scratch, like I may want to stay at the White House because this guy's gone?
That seems
I'll
tough.
text him right now and ask. I find that very hard to imagine.
He hasn't been answering the question.
He hasn't been replying to me either.
Reince Priebus is gone now. Obviously, Sean was there as a Reince Priebus ally, part of the old RNC, Republican National Committee crowd that worked on the general election and then into the White House. So it is hard to see if you believe that President Trump is trying to unshackle himself from any restraints from the establishment where he still sees people who are resistant to him. Like, remember in that same interview on New Day that Anthony Scaramucci was talking about this notion of people inside the White House who still felt that they were trying to save America from Trump instead of injecting Trump into America. That was the Scaramucci language.
That's fascinating insight.
And, you know, I think Donald Trump is trying to make sure that he is clearing house of anybody who feels that they're somehow saving the country from the president.
So why not have Scaramucci resign after he said what he did to Ryan Liz 4 days ago?
Because I think he's feeling people out, honestly. And I think the president was probably talking to Kelly, I have to presume, about this. And so I think there are a whole lot of things that are, that enter into this decision. And by the way, it's a little more dramatic. Just let's say you have a new sheriff in town on one day and a head rolls that day, and it's done. I mean, it is a little reality TV like, it is a little into the boardroom and who comes out, and I think that again, we have to hear from General Kelly and do our reporting here and find out exactly what the chain of events was on all of this that would make Scaramucci, offer his resignation, because as he told us multiple times, he loves the president, and this is the job of his dreams.
Right. Were you going to say something?
And I was just going to say, new reporting coming in from Caitlin Collins at the White House that John Kelly felt like he was not disciplined and that he had lost his credibility in the wake of that New Yorker interview. So all of this was at play. And so even though I'm told that Kelly, that Scaramucci, I should say, offered to resign to Kelly, clearly he got the message that there was really no other choice.
Right. And again, this would not be happening without the president's blessing. And if an added benefit, to your point, Gloria, which I think is a wise one, is the president sees a way to buck up his new chief of staff as well, and really, so yes, give my blessing to this, and yes, look like a chief of staff heads roll on day one, you're really going to look like you are in charge. I think that plays to his benefit, to the president.
No ambiguity.
Well. Okay.
No ambiguity here now.
You know, we were talking before about the James Baker quote. I'm just paraphrasing about, you know, for a chief of staff, you either have somebody who's really big on the chief's piece or really big on the of staff piece. And it's the of staff people who are much more successful chiefs of staff. This perhaps being the piece that, you know, Scaramucci was going to be reporting to POTUS instead of now all these Kelly, thank you. I was going to say Reince Priebus to Kelly. And what about the other, you know, Steve Bannon, Kellyanne Conway, Jared Kushner? Do we know yet? Are they then reporting to General Kelly or to the president? Do we know?
It would seem that way.
You're looking at me like,
no, we don't. We have not heard one by one them answer that question today after John Kelly was sworn in as chief of staff. But Kellyanne Conway was asked that very question yesterday on a Sunday show, and her answer was, "I am here to serve the president and the chief of staff's needs. However, I can best be deployed to do that." It was not a clear answer of who she's reporting to, or if her walk-in privileges have been taken away, or what have you.
Even if they are, she'll still communicate with them through the television.
Right, of course.
Right, but this is up to the president because he has an open door policy. Like you might have in your office, or I might have in your office. Come on in. Well, presidents don't normally have that.
Oval Office privileges.
Oval Office privileges, and so will that change? I mean, that remains to be seen. You know, Donald Trump has run his business this way for decades. He likes chaos. He likes competition among the people who work for him. And this outsourcing of being the person in charge, I think, is something very new to Donald Trump.
But to get the best people, does chaos enable that? I was just thinking, Brooke, about how it took months to find a new communications director.
Right.
This is a vacant job for a long time. Spicer was filling in the job. Then Scaramucci's finally named communications director. Trump had been trying to bring him in for a while. Reince apparently had been trying to block him. Anyway, finally, Scaramucci is hired. Who's going to get that job now? There were a lot of people in the conservative media world who talked about that job, who turned that job down. I wonder who, if anyone's, going to be comms director now.
Let me hit pause on this conversation. If you are just joining us, and let me just bring you all up to speed. Let me welcome our viewers in the United States and all around the world. I'm Brooke Baldwin. It is not a dull Monday afternoon here in New York and beyond. Here's the news. After being in his position as the communications chief at the White House, Anthony Scaramucci has resigned. 11 days later, he's resigned. Now, keep in mind the timing of this resignation also happening on day one of the new chief of staff, General John Kelly, who had come over from Homeland Security. So he's now in this new job. Questions are swirling as to the timing, as to whether or not this was perhaps a condition of General Kelly taking this chief of staff position. Was it so long as Scaramucci left? We remember the story that will be one of the stories of the year, this interview in the New Yorker with Ryan Lizza, and the profanity-laced language that the White House communications director used. Yet 4 days later, that was when he tendered his resignation. And now everyone is feeling the reverberations of this. We're getting more reporting. Let me just begin at the White House with Caitlin Collins, who's a reporter there. Caitlin, we're waiting for a statement from the White House on this resignation. Have we gotten it yet? And what more do we know as far as the why?
We're still waiting on a lot of details as for all of this right now. We're told that the press secretary, the most people upstairs in the press shop at the White House are huddled in an office right now. We're told that we can expect a statement any minute now. We're supposed to see Sarah Sanders at the podium for the briefing here at about 3:45. But right now we're being told by White House officials that Anthony Scaramucci was removed from this position because John Kelly did not think he was disciplined enough and thought he had burned his credibility. As you know, in that interview with the New Yorker writer last week, Anthony Scaramucci went on this vulgar rant against Reince Priebus when he was the chief of staff at the time, and we're told that that played a factor into that he didn't think he was disciplined enough and, you know, to take on this role in this White House. We've seen a lot of that, and that's been a lot of speculation about John Kelly coming into this position as chief of staff, is how he would impose discipline on a West Wing that is filled with fighting from different factions of staffers.
Caitlin, thank you. And let me just bring in my panel, because what you just reported is significant. You know, we don't know if this was a condition of his resignation, but the fact that we're learning that General Kelly wanted Scaramucci out because he didn't think he was disciplined and had burned his credibility. David Chalian, thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that is that John Kelly I am sure believed that. And this wouldn't have happened unless the president agreed with him. And so I believe that it is the president who also thinks that Scaramucci clearly took on too much water, got too far out in front, no doubt, but really blew himself up in this role in a way that was no longer going to be helpful and gets the added benefit of giving John Kelly a fresh start on day one.
Gloria?
Well, I agree. I'd like to be a fly on the wall in the conversation before Kelly took this job about what it is he would want to do as the White House Chief of Staff. And I am sure, since this didn't happen, weeks and weeks ago, I am sure that the Scaramucci outburst, the vulgarity, the fact that he said he reported directly to the president, and by the way, threatened publicly to fire everyone.
Right.
Everyone.
Right.
Which, if you're running the White House, who is this guy over there? If you're the chief of staff, who is this guy over there threatening to fire your staff? That's unacceptable if you're coming in to run things. So I'm sure it became a topic of conversation. I'm also sure, I don't know this, but the president has some loyalty to Scaramucci. He was trying to get him a job over and over again. Scaramucci felt he had been blocked by Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon.
Right.
And we don't know yet if he'll have another post
and we
in
don't
this administration.
know, and we don't know.
I mean, he may have another post in this administration.
Right.
Okay.
So
and that's why this statement we just received is careful. It only says he's leaving his communications director role.
Well, let me read it. Let me read it. We have it here. This is the statement that we just got from the White House. It's short and sweet. Oh, thank you very much. Anthony Scaramucci will be leaving his role as White House communications director. Mr. Scaramucci felt it was best to give Chief of Staff John Kelly a clean slate and the ability to build his own team. We wish him all the best.
Doesn't rule out a job elsewhere in the administration. Remember, he had been at the Export-Import Bank in a brand new role before moving over to the White House. This was such a huge moment for Scaramucci. As Gloria was saying, he had wanted this for months. He had been seeking this for a long time. He had sold his firm in preparation for this, and to lose it all, to see it crumble in
11 days.
11 days. I was going to say less than 2 weeks.
My executive producer just jumped in my ear and said, this is the same language that Sean Spicer used. Do you remember that?
That's right.
Similar,
clean slate.
Clean slate, build his own team.
Right. Turn the page. As the president said on Twitter this morning, no White House chaos, but I mean, look at the banner. The banner on screen says it all. This is chaos at the White House, and it does speak to the president's choices about hiring. This is ultimately about the president and who he decides to hire. Now, he's getting praised for hiring Kelly, and it's Kelly's first day. But Scaramucci, that was a big addition to the team 11 days ago.
Well, and also, if you want to get the bad news out, the controversy, I think the feeling is just do it, get it done. And that's what this is.
Jeff Zeleny was saying from the White House, he was saying this feels more like more than a reset. And I think you had said earlier, almost like a house cleaning in these major role changes. Do we think, though, that this will be enough? I mean, last week we all had whiplash, and now it's just Monday. I mean, do you think with General Kelly as Chief of Staff, David, that this will be, and Scaramucci being gone, and maybe that is a harbinger of things to come as far as how General Kelly will be able to rule? Is this a good thing?
Well, my guess is this is not the end of staff changes in the White House. I can pretty much assure that. I think Kelly clearly is going to have the latitude to do exactly what the statement says and be able to build his own team. And so I think we probably will see some other staff changes. But I think what this Scaramucci thing is, even forget John Kelly's story today. I've never seen a 10-day trajectory like this at all. I mean, this was the dominant person from the Trump White House last week in the news media and every story was Anthony Scaramucci.
Totally.
I mean, he came onto the scene like a rocket.
That's
the announcement that Spicer was leaving, the fact that Priebus and Bannon were not part of it really and trying to, not part of the discussions and last minute trying to stop it from happening, holds the first briefing and does it all himself, names Sarah Huckabee Sanders press secretary, and then goes into this tirade with the New Yorker about Reince and on CNN's New Day, sort of with guns blazing. I've just never seen a star burn so bright, so quickly, and flame out.
So what's the moral of the story?
Well,
don't get ahead of the president.
Don't become the star of the show when there's only one star allowed.
And another moral of the story is there's another star, actually 4 stars. 4 stars.
Good one, Gloria.
Right there. And And if you're a four-star general, you might think that somebody who was threatening to fire people publicly, who was getting out ahead of the president and the chief of staff, no matter how tenuous Reince Priebus's tenure was, and threatening to fire him, was not playing within the chain of command. And he might have thought, you know what? This guy has damaged himself so much internally because he's threatened people's jobs, and it's not the way I want to run this White House, and that it was completely untenable. And you know, I think that we'll have to see if he said it to the president or if the president understood that himself.
Let me just explain to all of you what you've been watching on the right side of your screen in the box. These are live pictures from within the White House for this Medal of Honor ceremony with this Vietnam War veteran who will be the Medal of Honor recipient here momentarily, and we'll take that live. But just to tell you, and a lot of these people we're talking about, including I spied General Kelly, the new day one chief of staff there, sitting in a row at the White House, just to give you perspective on what we're discussing. And then after this, there's Ivanka Trump. Then after this ceremony, we are supposed to have, Stelter, correct me if they've changed it, you know, at 3:45 Eastern Time, this on-camera press briefing. What does the Scaramucci resignation say for any sort of press strategy moving forward?
Right now, there isn't one. That Sarah Huckabee Sanders is still scheduled to have a 3:45 briefing on camera. It may get delayed, partly because of this ceremony and partly because of all this breaking news. I don't think. I wonder if Sarah Sanders, when she came into work this morning, knew that this was going to happen. You know, she has become sort of the only steadying force in the press operation with Spicer out. One of the other assistant press secretaries was also pushed out last week by Scaramucci. Remember, it was just a few days ago Scaramucci vowed to fire all the leakers. He said, I'm going to fire everyone if I have to. Instead, he's the one out. SNL didn't even have time to cast him, lasting only 11 days. I think a lot of folks wondered who. There was even online chatter about this. Who are they going to have play Scaramucci?
Hopefully Mario Cantone enjoyed it while it lasted.
That's right. That's right. He played him on the President's Show.
Just looking at Ivanka Trump.
News.
All right, here's the big breaking news right now. We have some new reporting coming in regarding the newly appointed Chief of Staff, John Kelly, and his response when he learned that President Trump fired James Comey, the then chief of the FBI. Shimon Prokupecz and Pamela Brown are here with us from our Justice Department covering all of this. And so, Shimon, what have you learned? Or Pam?
So I'm going to take it here.
Yep.
So, Brooke, what we've learned that incoming White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, was so upset with the way President Donald Trump handled the firing of FBI Director James Comey that he called Comey shortly after he was terminated to say how angry he was. This is according to two sources familiar with the conversation between Kelly and Comey. At the time, Kelly was Secretary of Homeland Security. The sources say Kelly was particularly upset by the way Comey was treated by learning he had been fired on the news rather than by the president. The call took place while Comey was traveling back from Los Angeles to Washington on May 9th after learning the news. Brooke, I should note Comey declined to comment to us about the story. The White House and the Department of Homeland Security did not comment.
And there's more to this story because we've learned from our sources, Brooke, that Kelly was so angry that he even told Comey at the time that he was contemplating resigning from his position as Secretary of Homeland Security in a showing of solidarity. Comey responded during this phone conversation by telling him not to resign, but clearly it just shows you how upset he was by the way it was handled. Now, we should point out the sources we spoke with cautioned that it was unclear how serious Kelly was about resigning himself, and of course that never happened. Now he is at the White House as Chief of Staff, sworn in today. And for context, the sources said that Comey and Kelly are not particularly close friends, but that they had a professional relationship and a deep mutual respect for one another. And Kelly was so upset, even quote, disgusted, as one of the sources said, about the way Comey had been treated by this president, and that is why he made this phone call to express that and even contemplated resigning at the time in May when this all went down, Brooke.
Okay, so let me broaden this conversation now. We have Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, who knows General Kelly extremely well, served with him for many, many years, and also James Galliano, former FBI, CNN law enforcement analyst. And so first, General Hertling, to you, does this sound like General Kelly, you know that even though it sounds like he wasn't extraordinarily tight with James Comey, he was so upset that he would have contemplated resignation over the way that Comey was treated by the president?
Brooke, I don't want to comment on the reports of palace intrigue or the reality show, which is the White House right now. But what I will tell you is I did get to know John Kelly very well in combat situations on 2 occasions, both in 2003 and 4, and then again in 2007 and 8 when we were together in Iraq. And what I'll tell you is this is a man of extremely strong values.
Forgive me, as if I don't even know what to say. We just learned, as we're talking about the news with Comey and General Kelly, I now just got a piece of information in my ear that, how long has he been in the job, Scaramucci? The mooch has been in the job like a week and some change. He has just resigned from his position as Director of Communications. This was someone who, I'm surprised. Let me just be real with you. This is someone who took the job. Remember, Sean Spicer ended up deciding to resign. We know what's happened in the New Yorker interview, the profanity-laced New York interview with Ryan Lizza that Scaramucci did just a couple of days ago when he was speaking ill, not only about Reince Priebus, but also about Steve Bannon. This is extraordinarily significant. We're getting some folks. We're going to jump on set to go through this breaking news that Scaramucci has resigned. Caitlin Collins is at the White House. Caitlin, what? How did this happen?
There's a lot of news coming out right now, Brooke. We have heard that Anthony Scaramucci, the communications director, who was named communications director just last Friday, has been removed from his position. We don't have a lot of details right now, but we do know that there's been a lot of drama since he was brought into this position. We saw Press Secretary Sean Spicer resign in protest over him being named to this position, and then we saw the Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus, ousted last week over all of this drama that's been going on. As you know, there was that Anthony Scaramucci interview where he blasted Reince Priebus and accused him of being a leaker of White House information. So it's safe to say there's been a lot of drama coming out of the Scaramucci being appointed to this position, and we're likely going to find out more over the next few minutes about what happened with Scaramucci being removed from this position.
Okay, I'm looking at them. I'm talking to you. I'm looking out of the corner of my eyes. We have just mic'd 2 more people joining me as this news. Again, if you're just joining us, the chief comms director over at the White House, Anthony Scaramucci, who's been in the job. What was he? He was at the podium referring to Reince Priebus as his brother. This was 2 Fridays ago. He has now resigned. Gloria Borger, David Chalian, surprise.
Yes.
What?
Every day. Every day. Well, look, and David can talk about this too. I mean, we are supposing this. I'm texting a bunch of sources now, but it seems to me that the General Kelly is the new sheriff in town.
Okay.
And that maybe he wanted some things very clear before he took the job. Who knows?
As a condition to take the job.
Who knows?
To have the mooch be gone.
I mean, one of the things that Anthony Scaramucci made very clear when he took that job 11 days ago and was unveiled and went and had is that he reported to the president.
That's correct.
Well, now there's a new White House chief of staff, so the reporting structure to the president is clearly part of the discussion that a new chief of staff would have with the president about how this is going to work. You also have to look at this. It seems to me, I mean, we thought Reince Priebus's tenure was short as chief of staff. If you look at the history books,
6 months.
This must be the shortest communications director tenure ever. It was almost like a suicide mission. He strapped on a suicide vest. His 11-day mission will be known as getting rid of Reince Priebus, from accelerating the departure of Reince Priebus from the job as chief of staff. He went in, he blew him up initially when he was at the podium that Friday, talking about we're like brothers, but we're at odds, and I'm not reporting to him. Right. Clearly trying to act like chief of staff. He then does that outrageous, salacious New Yorker interview. And now he's out of a job. So his total mission, Anthony Scaramucci, seems to have been about getting Reince Priebus out of that job.
But then he didn't resign over the language he used, which in any corporate setting, one would not have a job the next day.
And in any military setting either, by the way. Yeah. And also, we all knew at the time that Scaramucci was channeling the president's feelings about Reince Priebus. Not his language, okay, but he was channeling the president's feelings. So you can imagine when you have someone like General Kelly coming in, he wants to make the lines of authority very clear. He wants to make sure everybody's going to go through me, perhaps, I would assume, that Scaramucci had already said, by the way, I don't have to go through the chief of staff, I can go to the president himself, and by the way, I'm going to fire everybody. Well, if you're the incoming chief of staff, you're going to say, wait a minute, I don't think that's how it needs to work or should work. And why wouldn't he have had a conversation with the president about these kinds of things before he took the job?
Let me go to Jeff Zeleny, who also has some reporting on the fact that Scaramucci and his big 11 days as comms director at the White House are over. Jeff Zeleny, what have you learned?
Brooke, we are learning that there will be a statement coming out shortly, we believe, certainly this afternoon, likely pretty soon, from the White House, explaining all of this. Explaining the what led to this really abrupt decision, as David and Gloria were just talking about there, after about 10 days or so in this position and not yet even actually officially starting. He was going to officially start this week, but we're told that there will be a statement coming out, and there's a potential possibility here, Brooke, that he could be moving to a different job. We don't know that. We're being advised that to be very careful with our language here. But we do know the president effectively lost faith and some confidence in Anthony Scaramucci after, that tirade, as you said, that he went on against Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon, who remains still in the West Wing as the chief strategist here. So the language was one thing that the president initially, we were told, was fine with, but once all the coverage started coming in about this, he was somewhat alarmed by it. So, Brooke, I mean, this is a house cleaning day, and first and foremost, the president appearing with his chief of staff. And he did say that everyone would report to the chief of staff. He has the full authority here. Where, Brooke, this is the first big sign that, of course, includes Anthony Scaramucci. That has been a lingering question. Would he continue reporting to the president? Now it doesn't matter because he is out. And this is certainly a big moment. I would call this more than a reset. This is something that is a sign that people who have the president's ear are telling him that this was not a good thing to have Anthony Scaramucci as the communications director. And this is a moment we do not yet know if it was John Kelly's doing here, but we do know the president was dissatisfied and unhappy with Anthony Scaramucci. We heard that earlier today. So, Brooke, as we get more on this, we'll bring it to you, but keep an eye out for that statement coming shortly.
We will keep an eye out for it, also keeping in mind that the White House was supposed to be having this on-camera briefing in just about an hour from now. We'll stay tuned to see if that happens, but I've got some more guests here. I want to bring in Pam Brown. Pam Brown is our justice correspondent who has some news?
I do. So I am told by a person familiar with the situation that Anthony Scaramucci went to the now Chief of Staff, John Kelly, and offered to resign. And John Kelly, of course, accepted, as we know. And the reasoning behind it, he said, is that he wanted to allow John Kelly, now as the Chief of Staff, to create his own team. That is sort of the reasoning that was given. But I think it's a significant sign in terms of how much latitude the new Chief of Staff has in this situation. The person I was speaking with made that point, that clearly this is sending a strong signal that John Kelly, as Chief of Staff, is in charge. He has a lot of latitude, and clearly Anthony Scaramucci went to him, offered to resign, and that's the end of it. He is now gone.
But it also clearly reflects that President Trump lost confidence in Scaramucci as a spokesperson for him, as an image, as somebody whose image he thought was working to his advantage. If this, no doubt, John Kelly was able to build his own team, I have no doubt, but if President Trump thought Anthony Scaramucci's performance over the last 11 days was how he wanted to be seen and what he wanted to be, this would keep going even with a new Chief of Staff.
But, he never commented about Scaramucci's vulgarity. He never said, this is inappropriate, this is unacceptable, because the message that Scaramucci was delivering about Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon, by the way, was clearly sanctioned by the President of the United States. So, there is a new sheriff in town. He's doing things a little bit differently, and I think he wanted to make it very clear, and Scaramucci offered it, as you're reporting, but I'm wondering whether that was
what was behind
required.
Right.
Jim Acosta, just adding voices to this whole conversation. Jim Acosta is our senior White House correspondent, also standing by with a little bit more news on the Scaramucci resignation after 11 days. Jim, what have you learned?
Well, the president was insisting earlier this morning on Twitter that there is no White House chaos. I think we now have further evidence that nothing could be further from the truth. There is obviously White House chaos when a communications director is only on the job for 11 days and then has to resign after a profanity-laced tirade that dominated the news for part of last week. You have chaos here at the White House. Now, I was talking to a friend of Anthony Scaramucci just in the last couple of hours who was insisting that he was going to weather this storm and that the story about him dog cussing some of the people here at the White House, that all of that was going to pass. Obviously, that did not pass. And as Jeff and others were pointing out in the last several minutes, there was this issue that General Kelly was going to have to deal with as Chief of Staff as to what to do with these rival factions inside the White House. Anthony Scaramucci represented one of those factions inside the White House, and that is the former campaign people who did not very much like the RNC people who had come in to help run this White House. People like Ryan Priebus, the former Chief of Staff, Sean Spicer, the former White House press secretary. Those two factions were among the factions fighting with each other inside this White House, and there was this question, and it was obviously going to come up at the briefing this afternoon, as to who reports to General Kelly. Do these rival factions inside the White House, people like Steve Bannon and Jared Kushner and so on, do they report to the Chief of Staff, or do they just report directly to the President and have the ability to go around the Chief of Staff? That is the exact situation that Ryan Priebus was struggling to deal with when he was in charge, or not really in charge, when he was managing the staff here at the White House, is that he had people routinely going around him, walking right into the President's office and having meetings with him, sometimes meetings that Priebus did not even know about until later on. And so this was one of the situations that General Kelly was going to have to deal with. Now, I do understand from talking to a source who is close to the President, and this is not exactly talking about the Scaramucci situation, but that this is a pattern that sometimes happens over here at the White House, is where something flares up, the President says, well, no big deal, or he may even like that. And then later on, as he's getting feedback from other people, he sort of changes his mind and says, you know what, maybe this wasn't such a good thing. This person suggesting to me that perhaps that is what happened with Anthony Scaramucci here, whereas it may have felt cathartic to this president to see Scaramucci lashing out and going after some of these people who the president wasn't very high on here in the administration, but then after time, after reflecting on it, perhaps didn't think too well of Scaramucci's performance over these last 11 days, Brooke.
Maybe this was a condition, as Gloria was saying, we don't know yet, of General Kelly taking on this Chief of Staff job. But let me go back to Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. We were talking about the reporting on how, General Kelly felt when Trump fired Comey, and I had to cut you off. Forgive me, I never want to cut off a general, but, to get to the Scaramucci story. But I understand you've been listening to this whole conversation and this news, General, and you have been smiling.
President Trump urging Congress to get back to work on health care, or he will, quote, let Obamacare implode. The president is also threatening to cut subsidies to Congress people and insurance companies that cover low-income Americans. Just moments ago, he tweeted this: if Obamacare is hurting people, and it is, why shouldn't it hurt the insurance companies, and why should Congress not be paying what the public pays? Let's discuss with Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland. He's a member of the Appropriations Committee. Senator, thanks so much for being here.
Great to be with you, Allison.
Let's start with that question that the president poses one more time. If Obamacare is hurting people, why shouldn't it hurt the insurance companies? And why should Congress not be paying what the public pays? What is the answer to that?
Well, first of all, Obamacare is not hurting people. In fact, what would have really hurt people was if we had passed Trump Care. And we know from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office that that would have thrown tens of millions of Americans off of affordable care.
Right, but not everyone is delighted with Obamacare, and the people have grave reservations about it.
Allison, nobody has said it's perfect. We've said from the very beginning we need to improve the exchanges. The first order of business is for the president to stop trying to sabotage the exchanges. There are a couple things that are totally within the power of the Trump administration. Number one, the cost-sharing payments that you just mentioned. Those have been going on for a long time. He's threatened to cut them off. That has created uncertainty, and that's why you have insurance companies threatening to increase premiums. Number two, enforce the individual mandates so you don't just have sicker, more intense care patients in the exchanges. Three, make sure you advertise the fact that the exchanges are now open and people should enroll. Congress can then get back to the regular order, as Senator McCain said, and work on a number of other things to both strengthen the exchanges in the short term, but also we should work on things like reducing the cost of prescription drugs and other things that we can do on a bipartisan basis.
The president seems to be suggesting that you in Congress, that members of Congress are sponging off the system somehow, and you don't deserve subsidies or any federal dollars. What's your response to that one?
Actually, that's just flat out untrue. Members of Congress are in the exchanges like anybody else. Members of Congress are treated like every other federal employee that works for the United States government. So the president is actually just trying to stir the pot as usual on these issues. He doesn't have the facts on his side as usual. I'm hopeful that you're going to have Republicans in the Senate and the House now saying that they want to work with Democrats. Time to ignore the president's tweets. The president has also, threatened Senate Republicans and said that they should go to a different voting system. Why don't we just focus on working together to improve the exchanges in the short term, and then work on these bigger issues like reducing the cost of prescription drugs? I think within the exchanges we should offer a public option in the exchanges. That would create more competition. It would drive down prices.
One more thing on this, because we just had Congressman Chris Collins on, who wanted to remind everyone that the subsidies were that House Republicans actually sued the Obama administration over these subsidies that the president seems very focused on, and that a district judge ruled that they were illegal because Congress didn't appropriate them. You're on the Appropriations Committee. How can you justify these subsidies that your committee, that Congress didn't ever approve?
Well, the original legislation essentially directed funding for these payments, these cost-sharing payments, in order to provide stability in the exchanges. If my Republican colleagues want to join together and vote through the appropriations process to provide those payments on an annual basis, that's fine. Even better would be if Congress got together on a bipartisan basis to pass legislation that mandated the cost-sharing payments going forward. But as you indicated, the courts have asked questions about that. I should point out
decided,
that,
right? I mean, this district court decided that it was illegal.
A lower court level made a decision, but and importantly, they did not direct that the payments end. That is really important. I mean, they made a decision, but they said the payments can continue as that case was contested in the higher courts. So there's nothing to prevent the president at this point in time from continuing the cost-sharing payments. In fact, he's been doing it, but he's been doing it on a month-to-month basis instead of providing the certainty that everybody needs going into the fall. So he's been doing that. And there's no reason for him to stop doing that now, other than the fact that he might want to sabotage the system.
Senator, I want to read to you, there's another new tweet from the president that just came out. I've not read it yet, so we're going to put it here, I think, on the screen so that we can all read it together. Highest stock market ever. Best economic numbers in years. Unemployment lowest in 17 years. Wages rising. Border secure. No White House chaos. Your response?
Well, let's just start at the end. I mean, obviously, there's incredible chaos in the White House, which is why they're bringing in General Kelly. I think the struggle for General Kelly is going to be that normally a White House chief of staff has to try and organize the staff. In this case, you have a commander-in-chief who is totally out of control, tweeting at all hours of the day and night, and there's no consistency to the policy. I should point out that when it comes to the economy, you're continuing to see what you saw under the previous administration, which is continued growth. But the reality is there are lots of Americans who are still being very squeezed between rising costs and flat paychecks, which is why, Allison, the Democrats on a bicameral basis, House and Senate, have put forward a plan to focus on the economy, to focus on bread and butter issues, and come forth with concrete measures we can take to improve the economy, improve jobs, and also wages.
Well, look, I mean, I think his point is that despite whatever's going on in the White House, the stock market is having a banner month or banner run, the highest ever. Unemployment rate has dropped to the lowest in anyone's memory, recent memory at least. So, I mean, I think that the president would say his point is that things on that front seem to be working.
Well, as I say, there are millions of Americans that are really hurting. The reality is that what you're seeing under President Trump is a continuation of what was a steady decline in unemployment. You saw that beginning under the administration of Barack Obama. They had a record number of months of economic growth, and that is continuing under President Trump. The trajectory that began under President Obama, both in terms of jobs and reducing the unemployment rate. Stock market was up under President Obama as well. But that doesn't mean that there aren't millions of Americans who aren't hurting. The reality is folks at the top are doing very well. Yes, if you've got a lot of money in the stock market, you're doing just great. But everybody else is being squeezed, and people are working harder than ever. The gains are going to the top 1%, folks at the very top.
Yeah.
Everybody else is seeing flat paychecks or they're falling behind, which is exactly, Allison, why we put forward a plan to begin to address those issues so we can grow the economy, but also do it with more shared prosperity.
Senator Chris Van Hollen, thanks so much for taking time to be on New Day.
Thank you.
John.
All right, a tropical storm forms in the Gulf of Mexico. Who is in the storm's path? That's next.
Out.
So President Trump's election win surprised much of the country. And tonight, there's a new CNN special hosted by Fareed Zakaria that explores why Trump won. Let's take a look.
The happiest people tend to be the people that are making a nice income, that really enjoy their life and their family life, and not the people of tremendous wealth that are constantly driven to achieve more and more success. You're expected to be a certain kind of a person, and maybe you're not necessarily cut out to be that kind of a person.
How did that Donald Trump become this Donald Trump?
I'd like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
Joining us now is Fareed Zakaria, host of CNN's Fareed Zakaria GPS. Fareed, great to see you. Answer your own question. How did that sort of, what we see there looks like a more gentle, sort of romantic Donald Trump talking about how love should prevail over ambition and work become the candidate Trump we saw there?
I think what you see in that part of the documentary is the sort of reinvention of Donald Trump. You begin to realize that the person he is now is a carefully honed persona that he created through trial and error, taking advantage of opportunities. And I think there are a few key moments in his life. The first is he began to realize the power of celebrity and the value of celebrity. And The Apprentice, for a while, not as much long as he says, was the #1 show, 28 million people watching it. I think that made him realize, my God, this is powerful stuff. That's when he really gets out of the real estate business and goes into the branding business. But then he also starts feeling the currents of America in very much an intuitive way. I don't think he had any articulated sense. And he began to feel a few things. The anger against politicians. Remember, he runs on the Reform Party. He tries to run on the Reform Party ticket for a while. And then he begins to see the toxic energy on the far right. Remember, his first political moves are birtherism.
Absolutely.
And he knew that the election of a black president had stirred a kind of ugly racial animus among some people, probably a small subset, but he knew a way to get directly to them. So all of it combined, and it was the man met his moment. The point at which Donald Trump is elected is literally the low point in trust for politicians in Washington. It's a 50-year low. And that's when Donald Trump, so he got his timing right, which all great performers need.
It's about the man right there, and we saw that crippler lover, not a fighter moment. But then there's the moment. Talk to me about the moment, Fareed, the sort of socioeconomic hunger that existed, or to an extent still exists in the United States.
I think the part of it that I was most impressed by in doing the research for this is we know about the economics, we know about the hollowed out factories and the coal mines, and what I was struck by was the other two factors. So that's, if you will, capitalism. The other factor is culture, a real sense of cultural alienation that older, white, non-college educated Americans have, the sense that their country is changing because of immigrants, because maybe blacks are rising up to a kind of central place in society, because of gays being accorded equal rights, because of, frankly, a lot of working women. Everybody is sort of muscling in on a territory that, if you think about it, the white working man had. But the final one is class, social class. We don't talk about it a lot, but the election of Donald Trump is really a kind of class rebellion against people like us, educated professionals who live in cities, who have, cosmopolitan views about a lot of things. And I think there's a whole part of America that is sick and tired of being told what to do by this, overeducated professional elite that Hillary Clinton in many ways perfectly represented. And that's why they're sticking with him.
Yes, and that's why when Democrats think, oh, how long can this go on? Surely the chaos will mean that he would never be reelected. those factors.
Appreciate it very much. Let's get some reaction. Mike Rogers, first to you. What do you think?